He left today.
All right, guys, let's talk about section 4 here. Okay. What we did was we skipped over section 3. It really was just a focus, and I'm not even, it didn't really make a lot of sense in this. It just talked about different types of societies in history, everything from pre-agricultural to agriculture to so on. So I'm not going to make you responsible for it. So we're just going to move into section 4, which talks about groups within societies, keeping it more of a modern day kind of situation. So our goals today, our targets are to summarize the major features of primary and secondary groups. Those are the type of groups we most participate in, and identify the purposes that groups fulfill. Jacob.
We're already in chapter 4.
Yeah, I know. We're in section 4, not chapter 4.
Oh,
section 4.
Okay.
Right.
I'm in section 2.
Yeah, you're in section. I'm telling you, we skipped section 3.
So start a new one that says section 4?
Yeah, well, just all you have to do is just, yeah, not a whole new set of notes, just write. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So now you do not necessarily need to write this down. Unless you think that you might not remember this, because I am going to hold you responsible. A group must contain 2 or more people. That's kind of a duh situation. I mean, you should know that. There must be interaction between the members. In other words, you got to actually communicate with each other. Just a second. Members have a shared set of expectations, and the members must possess some sense of common identity. Now, Jacob, you had a question? Okay. So, and the picture is kind of, my hope is that kind of gets you to see there are 3 young girls, and they are members of a group, obviously a member of a specific culture that you can tell. And so, again, these are the basics of a group. So, let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry, I went too fast, didn't I? There you go. There's still a couple people typing. We got it?
Yeah.
Okay, move on. All right, again, some of this is like obvious, but if I'm not specific about it, my fear is that you'll feel like I left some important parts out. So, all groups are not the same. They are based on they exist for a lot of different reasons. One let me change my thought here. They can also differ in size. You know, when we've talked about that in the last a little bit, they could be one size, just 2 people. It could be 3 people, which would be a triad. Small groups, and in defining, the book says the small group is 15 or less. 15 members or less. And I'm sorry, I should have stayed quiet until you typed. right, so I stopped when I talked about a small group. Largest possible is their definition is 15. And would you have said that was a small group, 15? Would you call that? No. Why not? Why wouldn't you call, well, let's kind of figure this out a little bit.
Well, after a while, the group's too big, not everybody's engaged. Like talking to each other, I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, you're exactly right. Get too big, you lose engagement. You know, I look around at this group. We have how many here? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12 when Sonia's here. Okay. Anybody else not here? I think that's it. Sonia. Do what? Oh, Andrew, that's right. Yeah, Andrew was here earlier. But then, okay. All right. But and so we are under 15. And I have to tell you, when I'm teaching, I like that size, about 15, because somehow you maintain a group. Somehow people are more engaged with each other. It works a little bit better. You start getting larger than that, and I begin to notice this exact thing that is happening here. Large groups beyond 15 members have a tendency to sort themselves into smaller groups and separate themselves from what's going on with the group. And so it is kind of that a magic number there, it seems like, just from my own personal observations. Okay, so think about that. Does anybody here belong to a large group?
Senior class.
Senior class, yeah. So do you all work together? No,
We have our own little friend groups.
Right. Malachi? Shh. Yeah, you have your own groups, you have your own, certainly, yeah, and it would make sense. Because how do you maintain continuity when you have a bunch of people? It's very difficult. It really is. It is. So a lot of times, though, large groups, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I can think of one right off the top of my head when I'm talking about a small group, because we even call it that. That's why I think of that. Is that for my church, rather than we don't have Sunday schools anymore, we do what's called small groups. And then that's those people who choose, and it's a choice, to gather together in smaller groups, generally well under 15. And that works real well. And I can think of probably a number of other groups that are like that. That you have a larger group that you're connected to, but then that you sort yourselves into smaller groups to achieve whatever goals you might have. And so that's true of most all groups. Okay. Now, some groups also get together in terms of time. I love this picture because it really does, it's very seasonal, but it also kind of demonstrates an example of you gather for specific times. In this case, what time are we talking about?
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. Yes.
She skipped it.
Didn't hear anything.
I was busy working right then.
Do you know the schedule for tomorrow?
Yeah, I do.
It's
First
35, 35,
What?
35, 35,
First block ends at 8:06.
35, 35, then it's Veterans Day, then third block's full period.
First two blocks are 35 minutes, and Veterans Day is from 9 to 10:10. And then you go to third block is normal because lunch is in that, and then intervention's like 30 minutes, I think, 35.
30, 38, I think, something like that.
38,
And then fourth block is 44 minutes,
45,
and then you go to the others.
The assembly,
What
yeah.
time does that start?
The assembly at 2. So they'll call us down before that. Okay. All right. So important to note that time doesn't mean it's just a short period of time. It could be time, the group could exist over a long period of time. There's all kinds of groups that have existed for, years. Some groups exist in only one gathering. Others might be, you gather once a year. So time does play a role, though, in the type of group that you might have. So, oh darn it. Oh well, I left it in there. There was something that was supposed to be erased. I forgot to. So also, the groups are not the same in terms of organization. So we've got situations of formal and informal. So you guys go ahead and write those notes and we'll talk about those. So as you can see, a lot of this is common sense. And that's a good thing. But let's make sure we are clear, though, because a lot of times I think, oh yeah, this is easy to understand, and then when I give you a quiz or something like that, I find out like, ooh, I guess you didn't quite get it. So that's why we're going over this. So a formal organization. Structures, goals, activities, groups are clearly defined. Okay. And my other class gave these 3 examples: school, congress, clubs, as examples of formal organization. Can you think of some other examples of formal organizations?
Your work.
Sure. Sure. Your work would be one. Hang on, let me go ahead and add that. I added theirs, I'm going to add yours. Hang on, let me just get here. So work, what did you say, court? Sports. Okay, sorry.
Court could work too.
Yeah, definitely. Court, yeah, would definitely be examples of formal organizations. Now, but I have a question for you, Malachi. Would all sports be a formal organization? Why not? Okay, that's why I want to find out. What?
Some of them might not have, I don't know. Yeah, I would say professional more than high school.
Yeah. So, yeah, professional sports would definitely fit that. Or, whoops. Would definitely fit. But even, high school sports, wouldn't that be a formal organization?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when does it become informal then? Right. Yeah. Like a pickup game.
Yeah, when you're playing like,
Pickup game. Like a pickup game of some sort. And that would be, so here's an example of something that fits to a degree in both categories. What else would be an informal group? What else could be an informal group?
Board games?
Board games?
Yeah.
Okay. Oops. Fingers in the wrong spot. Games. Just games. Okay. Okay.
Video games.
Interesting. Here's video games. Yes. Why? Yes. Yeah. Yes. So it could literally, in that case, depending on how you define that particular situation, is how you might define it as either a formal or informal. Okay. What else could be, let's go beyond games, something else besides games. What else would be an informal situation, for informal group?
I don't know, I feel like it's like a group of strangers. Like,
Stranger danger.
family or friends, there's just a group of people anywhere and nothing specific.
Okay. Okay. Just, we talked about, last class, what do you think of that? Any gathering? We talked about a mob. We got to talking about how, there was the riots that existed. What was it that he gave an example? I can't think what it was now. But he was talking at first, this person talking about maybe that was formal because their goal was to do damage. But they didn't gather together and establish those goals ahead of time. Rather, as they gathered, it became something that grew into where people were doing damage and all of that. But it was not formal. It remained informal as a mob. So, yep. Okay. All right. Any questions about that? All right. Now, you don't have to write this. This is just kind of an introduction to the types of groups that we're going to be talking about. We're going to look at primary, secondary, a reference group, an in and out group, e-communities, and then social networks. So we're going to start with primary group. This you do need to have. The rash that I've been fighting is coming back.
Do they know what it is?
Nope.
Did you have to do blood work?
I may have to now.
That sucks.
Yes, it does. And it's driving me nuts.
I'm scared of needles.
I'm not. All right, you guys got this? Okay. Okay. So a primary group is something that exists for you as an individual over a long period of time. It does not end quickly. And primary groups are often cultivated over a period of time too. It may not start out as a primary group, but in fact become a primary group over time. The second thing is the one thing that I want to focus on for a moment. Entire self of individual is taken into account. What do you think that might mean? Entire self of the individual is taken into account when we're talking about a primary group. Sometimes this is helpful when you've got the book in front of you, you can read the whole context. We don't have that option. Well, you can, but let's try to think it through. If it's a primary group.
What's the question again?
Okay, what the second bullet there. What does that mean in the context of a primary group?
I'm just going to say that there's a focus on each individual rather than like everyone's known. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, now you're getting there. Now you're starting to hit there. Everyone is known, okay? It is a primary group. The picture that's up there is the TV show Friends. How many of you ever watched that? Okay, a few of you have. What's the thing about that whole show? What was at the heart of it?
How close they all were?
How close they all were. They really invested time into each other, right?
Yeah, they lived together, all of them at one point.
Right. And that's really, now obviously a primary group does not mean they have to live right on
Yeah.
top of each other. My primary group is definitely not that. But we are, if somebody is hurting, what do you think they want to know?
What was wrong?
What's wrong? They're invested, which is kind of where you were heading. They're invested. They put their entire self in your, if you think about your primary group, that's probably true. Now, some of you may not feel you even have a primary group at this point. Primary groups can come and go, but in most set of circumstances, they are pretty lifelong. They can be pretty lifelong. I've got a set of friends that I have from high school that I know we may not talk for 5 years, but I know we get together, it's like we never were apart. And that is something you will gain over time. You will know who those people are over time. You know, and I would consider them part of my primary group or a primary group. Okay. So relationships are intimate and face-to-face, and I want to make sure we're clear on this. We're not talking sex here. Intimate is another, in this case, a whole different range. Now, that doesn't mean it might be excluded, but intimate in this case is you know about these people. They are more than just an associate. I had a kid who told me, this has been a lot of years ago, she told me, she said, I have no friends. I have associates. And I was like, you have no friends? No, I have no friends. I said, are you sure?
She weird.
No. No. She was a street kid. Her life pretty much existed on the streets of Dallas. And out of self-protection, Dallas, Texas, out of self-protection, she chose to never have a friend. Because to her that was an intimate, you know exactly what we're talking about here, that was intimate. And she could not trust anyone enough to put them in that set of circumstances.
That's good though.
For her, it was safe. That meant safety for her. Yeah. I felt really...
Trust anybody these days. So why even put yourself in that position?
I think you, I mean, it takes a lot to put yourself out there. A primary group requires you to leave yourself vulnerable in a way. Okay? And so, but is that always a bad thing? You know, I think in a primary group you need to know who your friends are. You need to know who they are, which is part of being a primary group. If you're part of a primary group and you can't trust them,
You shouldn't be friends with them. Or you shouldn't even be around them if you can't trust them.
you might want to think about that. You might want to think, do you want to put, and sometimes, and we see this, teachers see this a lot with students, is that you're so hoping to be a part of a group that you set yourself up because that group really doesn't accept you, possibly. And so, and this is a real hard time when we're in high school. I remember it clearly. The people that I wanted to hang out with were not necessarily the people who I needed to hang out with. Because in reality, I couldn't trust them. I didn't necessarily recognize that at the time, but I did not necessarily trust them. I remember that very well. And those are not the kids, those are not the people that I just described, who I could get together with and be able to we can start talking like 5 years never happened. So, yeah. But a primary group is, in fact, intimate. And it should be face-to-face. Could you So think about it. Do you guys have online relationships, friends? No, I don't mean relationships as in like boyfriend, girlfriend kind of thing. I'm just, okay, you do. Would you call them part of your primary group?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any face-to-face time with them?
Well, no, but
And you would consider them part of your primary group?
I got some homies on Xbox Live, like, they got my back.
You sure?
On Call of Duty, yeah.
Ah, but reality?
They've been doing good so far.
Okay. Okay.
But that's the whole point, though. That's why we're playing online.
Online.
Because we can't be face-to-face.
Okay. All right. But you would still consider them part of your primary group?
I wouldn't treat them like my best friend, but yeah, they'd still be.
They're close. And I would argue with you, and we don't have to agree. I'm just, throwing out, okay? I would argue they're probably closer to our secondary group, which is still an important group. But they don't have that face-to-face intimacy. And again, I'm not talking sex, okay? They don't have that. Now, that doesn't mean they aren't important to you. They obviously are. But I might argue, for just the sake of argument, they might be closer to a secondary group.
Depend like how big you are, like into it.
Yeah, yeah. And there are some folks who, of course, who are so intimate, not intimate, into that gaming, that does become,
So they make their living.
in some cases, yeah.
Look at YouTube.
Okay. All right, so let's look at secondary groups now. That's what this is.
Telephone primary group.
Okay, I'm going to go on. If you're not quite done, just keep typing. Okay, so a secondary group, interaction is somewhat impersonal. It would be considered temporary. Even though you might have a relationship over a long period of time, it's based on a specific goals or organized. This is kind of why what I was thinking, Michael, might be yours. This is kind of what my head was thinking. Because it's based around what you just, what was it? What was the game that you were talking about?
Call of Duty.
Yeah, Call of Duty. It's based around that. That's why I was thinking it was more like this. You can disagree, it's fine. But relationships tend to be casual and limited to impersonal involvement, focused on that goal. Person's importance to the group lies in the function performed. Okay? And individuals can be replaced easily by anyone who can carry out the specific task needed. Now, I'm going to talk about FFA a second. What do you think? Now, that FFA here at Trail is big. It's big. Anybody here in FFA? Good. I was hoping. I was afraid I was going to be doing this without. Okay. Would you consider, your own personal opinion here, would you consider FFA your primary group or a secondary group? From what how it's defined here.
Secondary.
Secondary, okay. Not a bad thing, that's a good thing. Okay. So, but, I mean, do you have friendships that are connected with that? Probably some seriously close ones too. But the overall, the idea of FFA itself would be more of that secondary situation. Okay. And then individuals can be replaced easily by anyone who can carry out what task needs to be taken care of. Doesn't mean the person who may be dropped out is less, it's just they can be replaced. Does that make sense to you? I'm seeing like no response whatsoever.
Gotcha.
Gotcha? All right, cool. All right, so secondary groups. Now, additional groups that we can talk about are reference groups, in groups and out groups. Go ahead and write this and we'll talk about that. Let's see. Who do I want to do? Michelle. Yeah. Thinking about reference group. Any group with whom individuals identify and whose attitudes and values you adopt. Could you tell me, and you don't have to if you don't want to, this is strictly voluntary, what you might think would be your a reference group that you might identify with? Okay, Civil Air Patrol, okay, sure, yeah. Because what is it about them, what is it, their attitudes that you value?
Our like key values are like respect and integrity and, you know, doing the best in everything you do. So
Okay.
that's stuff that we kind of value off each other and as a group as a whole.
All right.
That we take with us.
Does that go with you, and you kind of already said it, or in a way, with that last statement, you take it with you. It goes with you, wherever, okay. Rachel, what about you? What,
Can't really, I mean, I guess, I don't know, I can't really think of any. I mean, I guess you could say like the soccer team, I guess. Start acting like them or talking like certain people.
yeah, I was kind of thinking, that's what you might say, yeah. Yeah, you do, you begin to take on, and again, I'm going to ask the same question, is there an attitude or values that you, that have grown out of that group?
I don't know. I guess we all kind of have the same attitude, I guess, but
Could you put a word to it, describe it?
they're crazy, I guess.
Attitude to win,
Yeah.
okay. Determination.
Yeah.
I would venture to guess that those who do not have that attitude are probably not part of the group that you identify with.
No, not really.
Yeah. A reference group is not necessarily something that is like I can say specifically, but they are, and in fact, the type of group or people you want to be around. That's who you hope to be. And I will put it simply in that, like, jocks tend to hang with jocks. You might argue with me on that, but I'm just for an effort. But there's no group out there that is identified as, you know, jocks. Now, they might be the football team, but that's not limited to. Okay? It's the attitude. It's the values that you have within that is your reference group. Okay? So, now, in and out groups, this is kind of obvious. Obviously, the group that you belong to and identify with, that's your in group. The groups that you don't identify with, that's your out groups. That was hard to understand, right? Okay. All right, let's move on. I don't know how well you can see it, but I just thought this was pretty funny. Now, granted, I don't even know if blackberries are out there anymore. Are they still out there?
Unfortunately.
Okay, so hopefully you can read this. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Which I just thought this was hilarious, especially with in terms of groups and attitudes. Works, doesn't it? Yeah. It's how we see, and if you could change that for any kind of type of group, but this works so well for iPhone, Android, and I am an Android user, by the way. Yes, and I do see myself as Einstein. No.
You should. You're smart.
Smart, yes. Yes, I am, yes, I have a Samsung. Very happy to have my Samsung. Okay. Can I move on? Did everybody see this? Get it? Okay. All right. All right. So now we're coming up to e-groups, e-communities. Members exhibit behavior similar to those primary group members in the real world. They argue, engage in intellectual discussion, exchange knowledge, share in the materials of their lives, gossip, argue, ague, left a letter out there, sorry, play games, and even flirt. The only difference is they do it online rather than face-to-face. Hey, Michael, does that sound closer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to do this. I'm just trying to fix this. different are e-communities in their description here than social networks?
Not very, but maybe. Depends on how you
Mm-hmm. Has everybody got this? All right, great. Any questions on, well, I asked the question, what is the difference between an e-community and then a social network? Let's look at social network. The thing about a social network, although we in today's world, when we say social network, what are we thinking of?
Instagram, Snapchat.
Anything that's online.
Yeah.
The social network really does include both real world and internet. But let's face it, the way the word is used today, it's pretty much internet and how that's connected. But so social networks, though, come in all forms. Our social network for National Trail is pretty much the school. Because we tend to be, we tend to know everybody. My hope is, as seniors, you know everybody's name in your class. Now, you may not be friends with everybody in your class, but I would bet you would know everybody at least by first name. Probably. Maybe not 100%, but I would hope you do. Okay. So, but it's that relationship that's formed. It's the sum total of who you are, who you know. Okay. All right. Now, purposes of groups begin to look at things like selecting leaders. And let's see, we are almost done. I think we only have a couple more to do. Give me a second here just to check. Yeah. This is the big one. So we'll be done about less than 10 minutes. Bless you. Oh, back? I didn't think you were coming back till the end of class. Okay. I'm recording, so you'll be able to pick up your notes. Okay. So at this point, we are very, very close to being done. So just hang. Okay. Is anybody in here playing basketball? Was that a hand up, Malachi? Okay. So, Malachi, have you guys started practice yet? Nope? Okay, then that doesn't, yeah? Okay. So, have you selected your captains yet? No. Okay. How does that process work? You vote?
Sure, I guess.
Okay. Who generally are the captains of a team? Leaders. Well, does that mean seniors?
No,
Okay, so a captain of the team may not be a senior.
correct.
Okay, okay, all right. So, but you formally choose, though, by a vote. Okay, have you ever been in a group where somebody just suddenly becomes a leader? Or kind of takes over, for lack of a better,
Thinks they can take over.
or thinks they can take over? Ooh, all right, all right. So if somebody, that's a good thing, they think they can take over. So then do they become a leader?
No,
No, what happens?
they get thrown off.
Do they? All the time?
I'm kidding you.
Well, selecting a leader can be as a very formal process like voting, or it may not be formal at all.
For us this year, our coaches picked our captains.
Yeah, okay.
We didn't get, I mean, we kind of voted, but kind of didn't at the same time. I don't know. But we usually, like when our previous coach, she would pick two, and then we would vote for one
Okay,
person. We did
Okay.
that for years.
all right. So what, were they picked, why were they picked? What qualifications?
Like this year, it was because we had new coaches, so it was me, Erica, and Chloe, and it was part of it was because we were seniors and we were the captains junior year too.
Okay.
We helped out the coaches like with the team and stuff like that since they were new and like helped them get used to us and stuff like
Okay.
that.
So you were task and goal oriented. So you were, in this case, what they're talking about is an instructional leader. Okay? Yeah. And you were pretty much formally set into place. Okay. Well, obviously, not all groups are formal. Remember, we had informal groups. How do members of groups, especially informal groups, how do they become leaders?
They probably just make themselves leaders, maybe.
Could be, yeah. Could be. A lot of times people look to certain ones because they know they can do something. So, ouch. They are often what's called expressive leaders. They're emotion oriented. They have taken a role. Sometimes it's thrust upon them. It's not always. They don't always choose to be, but they find ways to keep the group together and to maintain morale. They're the ones that often you can count on to be there thick and thin. Now, can you have an instructional leader and an expressive leader at the same time? Sure you can, absolutely. Sometimes it's that little freshman kid who's got, just for some reasons, got that ability to do stuff, and the senior doesn't have it. So leaders can be natural leaders and can show up in any number of places. All right, so we're almost done. Here we go.
It's frozen.
So purposes of group, they define their boundaries so that members can tell who belongs and who does not. Okay. I had a set of circumstances I belong to a group of people who we meet once a month, and we're all pretty good friends. But I was not an original part of that group because the original part of the group were married couples, and I'm not married. So, but although I was good friends with them, I was not part of that group. Okay, and I have to say, in looking at this diagram here, I wasn't a stranger, but I really wasn't within the group. Interestingly enough, or sadly enough, one of the members of the group died, one of the wives. And she and her husband were kind of the glue, I would say the leaders of the group. When she died, the group kind of fell apart. Another couple started taking it on. They wanted to invite me in, which I thought was quite nice. And then they invited a couple other people in as well, which kind of changed the dynamics of the group. Okay. Interesting that one couple participated with us, but because the dynamics of the group had changed, now we were all friends. That wasn't the issue, it wasn't friends, but because the dynamic of the group had changed, they no longer felt like they wanted to be a part of the group. So they dropped out, which was sad to see them go, personally. Then there was another person that was invited into the group. And I have to say, I didn't know her. I didn't know that I liked her or not. And I had a time here within this group to begin to decide whether I wanted to allow her in to the boundaries that I had set up personally. I've come to know her and like her a whole lot, and she's more than welcome in. But you can see how, and hopefully that example simplifies, or it helps to know that groups change. They never stay the same. They're not static. They're dynamic. They're always changing. Okay. Finally, the last thing for groups. They set goals, they assign tasks, and they make decisions. Yes. I'm not going to do 5. I was thinking about it, but I just don't want to. It's just not really relevant. So we're gonna end it right there.
Are we uploading?
Yes, upload your chapter 4 notes.
Mine's like all together.
Okay, great.
for 3.
Well, it's 3 and 4, yeah, the end of 3 and 4.